Unit 10, Video 2, 80s Economics, Supply-Side Economics, Reagonomics, and comparing Black Tuesday to Black Monday. Talking about computers today. Remember, in the last video, when we were talking about 70s economics, we had stagnation, and the economy was not growing. Two thoughts. Neither of these are correct. Neither of these are wrong. Let's start with the Keynesians, who were pretty much in control from the 30s up until the 70s, where we had that stagnation. The Keynesians believe government spending helps the economy. You're going to lead towards more government control. Modern liberals believe in this. Progressive believe in this. And this is kind of how we got stagnation. They were in control. It was their policies. So most practical, rational thinkers would say, let's do the opposite. And the opposite is going to be supply side economics. They believe, no, it's not the government that stimulates and helps the economy. It's businesses, it's workers, it's consumers, it's entrepreneurs and investors. Allow the people that are actually in the economy, creating goods, selling goods, buying goods, exchanging goods. Let the people that are controlling the products control the products, and that will help the economy. Less government. This is preferred by classic liberals, libertarians, conservatives. That will be the policy here in the 80s, and you'll see, oh, wow, it works. Remember, supply side is not completely the answer, and Keynesian economics is not evil. There is a balance that we could meet that would work really well for our country. So we're going to talk about the pros of supply side and how it helped the economy, but we'll also talk about some of the negative consequences of supply side economics. How does supply side economics work? Well, to make it real simple, supply side, meaning the people that supply the goods, that produce the services, not the government, the people making the stuff. If we make it easier for them to make the cars and make the computers, then that's going to help the economy. Well, how does that work? What are you going to do? Well, think about it this way. The supply side. If we make it easier to make goods, then we'll make more goods. And if we make more goods, the supply increases. And as the supply increases of those goods and services, the prices drop. As prices drop, people can buy more. If people are buying more, then they're going to have to make more goods and provide more services. If they're making more goods, if they're providing more services to Americans, then they're going to have to hire more workers. Those workers are spending, and the economy goes up. That's the simple theory of supply side economics, as opposed to Keynesian economics, which says, no, the government should do things. Well, how do you make it easier? Well, it's real simple. How can this work? Well, we have all these laws and regulations on what the supply side can do, all these laws and regulations and rules that entrepreneurs, that investors, that businesses, that workers have to follow all these rules and regulations. It makes it hard to make goods. If we make it easier to make goods, well, we can do that. Get rid of all the rules and the laws and the regulations and the restrictions on the supply side. Allow the supply side, allow the market to roll. What's this called? Laissez-faire economics. We've talked about that in previous videos in American History II. Hands off. Laissez-faire. The government's going to step back. Let the supply side work its magic. Opposite of Keynesian. How much money could these guys save if they didn't have to spend all this money on regulations and safety and restrictions? All that money they spend, it increases their expenses. And as their expenses increase, they have to sell their goods at a higher price to make a profit. When you have to spend a bunch of money on masks and clothing and restrictions, all that money they spend requires them then to sell their product for more to earn a profit. If they didn't have to buy all of these safety measures and follow all these expensive restrictions and regulations, if you could lower that cost, then they're going to be able to sell their products at a lower price and still earn a profit. That's how it works. You take away the rules and regulations. It makes it easier for them to make a profit, easier to make goods. You know, I've already talked about this, and it's going to lead to more factories, more workers. That's the theory behind supply side in the 1980s. Hands off. Government step back with the rules and regulations and restrictions. Thanks for leaving us alone. We're now rich. It's not perfect. We'll talk about some, because obviously, like, well, let's just do this. Save the economy. Easy. Again, in social studies, there's never one right answer. There's always going to be trade-offs. And with supply side, there's going to be trade-offs. There's going to be something that you give up when you make a choice. There's never a solution. I have to constantly say these in these videos because many people in America, whether you're conservative or a modern liberal, believes just solve the problem. There is never a solution. It's just trade-offs. There's always going to be a trade-off. You have to make a choice and try to create the least amount of harm. Never going to be a solution. When you pick supply side, there's going to be negative consequences. When you go Keynesian and it's all government control, there's going to be negative consequences. There's going to be a downside. For example, if you get rid of a lot of laws and regulations and restrictions on businesses, you're probably going to have more pollution. It's going to happen. That's a trade-off. Hey, you've stimulated the economy. You've created all these jobs. We all have money. Well, one of the ways that we did that was to dial back the environmental regulations, and then so we have helped hurt the earth. So there's always going to be trade-offs. Some people say, well, that's too much. I'm not willing to make that sacrifice. Okay, you can have a clean, safe environment, but you have to be poor. Well, I don't want to be poor. Okay, well, you can have money, but we have to make a sacrifice in terms of the environment. Well, I want them both. You can't have them both. It doesn't work that way. There aren't solutions. There are only trade-offs, as said by Thomas Sowell. Supply side economics is hands off. So here's another example. If we have hands off, no regulation, no restrictions, you're going to have cars that are dirty, that are not clean. They're going to make a lot of money this way because they're not having to spend money on engineers and engineers and scientists to make the cleanest possible car. They save money by not doing that. So then they can lower their prices. They're going to sell more goods. They're going to make plenty of money, but we sacrifice the environment. So then you create a law. So now you have hands on and the government gets involved and cleans up the cars, which is good, but that's going to cause the factory to lose money, following all these rules and regulations. It's going to hurt the economy completely. So really the answer, folks, is never one or the other. It's trying to balance between the two. We can still have some government involvement. You can still have some clean cars. They're going to make money. It's just going to be less money. They don't get super rich. They don't get super poor. That's kind of the answer. Blending supply side and Keynesian. That's the closest thing you're going to get to a solution. There's always going to be losers and there's going to be winners, but we can't all win, and we don't all want to lose. We want to try to balance that as best we can. Another idea of supply-side economics. Investors want to invest in companies, but there's a lot of rules and regulations on the stock market and the stock exchange about who you can invest in, how you can invest, and that limits the amount of money that gets invested into companies. And if monies don't get investment dollars, they cannot grow. So under supply-side economics, we remove a lot of these restrictions when it comes to buying and selling stocks and restrictions on companies. Companies don't have to prove that they're absolutely worth what they're asking, and companies are free to do whatever they want. Investors are free to do whatever they want, and this will stimulate growth. Less investing rules, that floods the money in, and that allows companies to grow. One of the problems, though, with that is if they're not following all these rules and regulations anymore and restrictions, a lot of times bad investments happen, factories collapse, the money disappears, and the economy crashes. That's the trade-off. If you go supply side, less restrictions on investors and companies, they can make some really bad decisions and really kill the economy. Again, you're trying to find a balance. You don't want the government completely regulating everything, but completely hands off probably isn't the solution either. But when you do relieve some of this regulation like you did in the 80s, it was easy to invest, and this led to growth, and that's why you see from the 70s we had stagnation, and then you start to see growth in the 80s because a lot of the rules were pulled back, and it was easier for investors to invest in companies, and companies were able to grow. Let's talk about the savings and loans problem. So let's talk about banks and why banks are even operating. So a bank will loan you money. You use that money to buy a house. Well, why did the bank even lend you money in the first place? Well, here's how it works. Someone deposits their money into the bank. Why did they deposit their money into the bank? Well, it's because the bank says, if you give us your money, we'll promise you 3% interest. That means if you give us $100,000 in a year, you'll have $103,000. Cool. I get money just by storing my money in your bank. Awesome. Well, how does the bank create $3,000 out of nowhere? Well, the bank takes your money that you loan to it, and they loan it to this guy at 6% interest. So just like the bank has to pay you back at 3%, this guy who borrowed the $100,000 from the bank, which is your $100,000, he has to pay back $106,000. So the bank now has $106. They pay you your $103, and guess what? They just made $3,000. They're a middleman. That's how banks operate. That's why banks lend. They lend money to make money. See how that works? That exchange right there. So let's talk about savings and loan. Typically when you buy a house, savings and loan industry loans you money. The job was to loan you money because I don't have $100,000. How am I supposed to buy a $100,000 house today? Well, I can borrow it from the bank and pay it off over time. Okay, that's cool. It's awesome. Well, one of the rules up until the 80s, remember rules and regulations, was that your savings and loan, you can only deal with loaning to houses. That's fine, but that limits the amount of money the bank can make. If the bank can only loan money for homes, then it can only get money back through interest through loans. It really limits their ability to grow. So again, supply side economics, less rules and regulation and restrictions. Hey, you know what? Savings and loan industry, your bank, you can use the money in different ways. You can also take that money, instead of just loaning out to people to buy homes, you can also take the money in your bank and invest it in the stock market. No rules, less regulation. And if you invest that money, you can make more money and you can grow. And that's awesome. Unless, of course, the economy crashes, which it did. And so as the investments of these banks collapsed, so did the banks with it. And when the banks go down, people couldn't borrow money to buy houses. That's your savings and loans in debacle in the 80s explained in about 2 minutes. We took away the restrictions, and without restrictions, they made bad choices. And with bad choices, the banks failed. And when you don't have banks in an economy, you don't have money in an economy, and your economy will suffer. So maybe you want to have some rules and restrictions from the government. You don't want too much. It's Goldilocks. Not too hot, not too cold, just right in terms of investment regulations. And unfortunately, we never seem to learn this from this mistake. And this is one of the reasons why we study history. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. These same things keep happening over and over. And unfortunately, we either put too many regulations and restrictions on the bank, or we don't put enough on the bank. We never seem to get the balance right. Ronald Reagan, a former actor, will take over the White House. He will institute his policy of Reagonomics. And his belief on taxes is basically the government's just stealing your money. And when the government takes your money, guess what? You spend less. When you have to give more money to the government, that means less money in your pocket. And if you have less, you buy less, they make less, and the economy suffers. Reagonomics says, look, let the people keep their money, let the people spend the money, and it will help the economy. If you don't have to pay taxes, then you can take your money, instead of forfeiting it to the government, you can take your money, spend it at a store. And when you spend it at a store, they have to buy more toy cars, like we talked about in the other video. That means the toy car factory has to hire more workers, and more people are spending, and more people are spending and not having to give taxes, and the economy grows. That's one of the basic theories of Reagonomics. Tax less and let the people, the supply side, help the economy. Another idea to this taxing less idea. If you don't have to tax as much, you can save with your money, or you can invest with your money. And then that money goes to factories so that they can grow. So again, we're leaving the money to the people, the customers, the businesses to spend and to grow, as opposed to Keynesians, which says, no, let's take the people's money, let's spend the people's money, and the government will increase the economy. That's the Keynesians. The supply side says, let the people keep their money, let the people direct the money throughout the economy to the best sectors possible, and the economy will grow. Here's the other side of that. Remember, there are trade-offs. One of the trade-offs of less taxes is less money for the government, which means less government money for school lunch, less government money for Medicaid, Medicare, food stamps, Social Security. So if you are paying less in taxes, that means the government has less money. That means the government is going to provide less social services and other services. That's the trade-off. If you want low taxes, then you're going to have less government helping the people. That's a trade-off. If you want high taxes, it hurts you as an individual, but that means the government can help people, making this problem worse. And it makes sense. Look, the government is doing the prudent thing. They have less money in tax dollars, so they can't spend on this. But unfortunately, during the Reagan administration, spending continued to grow. They still were spending money that they didn't have. And this time, instead of spending on people, they're spending on military expenses. So you can look under Reagan, the economy, government spending did not decrease. It should have decreased due to less taxes, but it increased because of military spending. Now, did that help in the Cold War? Yes, it did. But that's a trade-off that they're making. Probably a lot of people said maybe we should spend the money on the people instead of spending it on military goods. And then last, let's talk about Black Monday 1987. Clearly you can see in the stock market chart here, the Dow Jones, it drops. What caused this drop? Well, to understand Black Monday, let's talk about Black Tuesday from the Great Depression in October, about 50 years before, 70 years before. 80 minus 20, 60 years before that. So you remember in Black Tuesday, people thought supply is going to go up, so prices are going to decrease, and the factories don't have as many workers, and if there's less workers, they're going to buy less goods, and the economy's going to crash. And people were seeing all this stuff that was happening in 1929, and then the trade wars and less selling that period. Look, I think these prices are too high. I think these prices are inflated because the government's printed too much money. So I'm going to sell my stock now while it's high because I think a crash is coming. I think a correction is coming. The government has inflated all this by printing too much money. I'm going to sell now. I'm going to get ahead of this. And then everyone else sees you selling. It's like, whoa, 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 he's selling. Well, why is he selling? Well, he's selling. I better sell too. Now, all of a sudden in 1929, everybody is selling. Nobody is buying. Everybody's hip to, yeah, that's right. It's inflation. All these prices are inflated. The government was way too involved. They printed too much money. I'm getting out now. And as everyone rushes to get out, prices crash and plummet. And we see the supply was up, driving the price down. Now even the demand is really low because no one wants any of these goods. They realize the prices are really inflated, and you have a crash in 1929. We're going to have a similar crash in 1987. the Black Monday. Instead, this time, it's not going to be human beings doing it. It's going to be computers, computer algorithms programmed to buy and sell. It's not people saying, oh, why is he buying and selling? No, it's a computer program that's watching everyone buying and selling. And this is so much worse. So before we had people at least in control. Now it's computer algorithms. And once the machines get rolling and the algorithm gets going, there's no stopping it. The computers have been programmed to sell goods, and they're selling and selling and selling. And everyone's like, what's going on? We've never seen this before. Well, actually, we did see this before. It was just a lot slower. It was human beings selling like mad during Black Tuesday. Now we have Black Monday, and the people don't know what to do because they're not in control anymore. The computer algorithms have been programmed to sell because this stock's low, and then this stock's low, and then it's just a chain reaction of events that plummet the economy to the bottom. That is Black Monday. How do we fix this now? Have we learned from this mistake? Well, we really haven't really changed anything other than we have a circuit breaker policy. So when the computers go out of control and they're selling and selling and selling and everyone's losing their jobs and the economy is just vanishing before our eyes and all this money is disappearing, the answer is hit the circuit breaker and just turn the thing off. What? That's the answer. That is our solution. We haven't changed the way that we've got some regulations and restrictions about how these computer programs can work. But the big answer is I just turn it off, and hopefully when we turn it back on, everything will be right. And this isn't something that just happened once. We had a flash crash in 2010. This can and will continue to happen. And our only answer, and we've done this a couple times within the last year, and it's just turn it off. What are we doing? We have no control. We have lost control. The computers are running the economy, and our only answer is turn it off. What happens when we can't turn the computers off anymore? Oh, I need to just turn this video off. Supply side economics, Reagonomics, and then there's your Black Tuesday Monday, and turn it off.